build software. We're a CAD ERP integration company, focusing really on integrating not only CAD systems, but really all sorts of engineering type of systems into EPICOR ERP. So what I'm going to be focusing on here today is CAD Link, so integrating your CAD system and your engineering department into EPICOR. But before we get started on that, just a brief introduction as to who we are. So we started back in 2007, where the brand name of CADLINK was launched. The company, our owner, Jose, started about in 2002, but we've had great growth with the EPICOR partnership, and just this year we reached our 1,000 customer milestone. So we've got an extensive customer base who's seen the benefits and the need of having CAD and an engineering integration into ERP, into EPICOR. And because of our extensive customer base, we've worked with a ton of different CAD, PDM, and PLM systems. So the product of CADLINK integrating your engineering department, grabbing those parts and bill of materials and pushing that into EPICOR, not only limited to direct CAD systems. So we also work with PDM and PLM systems, because if you've got a PDM, if you've got a PLM system, those are typically your engineer's single source of truth for your part information and your BOM information. So if you've got a PDM or PLM, we would suggest integrating directly into those systems, and we do work with those systems as well. So not only CAD, but also PDM and PLM. So I mentioned at the beginning that our focus really is on engineering efficiency and integrating that into EPICOR. So just a quick glance at some of our products that we do offer other than CADLINK. So CADLINK I'll talk about in a little bit, but we also have ECN Manager, which is a full ECR, ECO, ECN web solution, which is tied directly into EPICOR. So we can show you open jobs, POs, inventory, and allow you to tie workflows and make decisions on how you want to handle POs, inventory, and jobs that may be affected by your engineering changes. Nestlink is a live integration between your nesting software and EPICOR. So if you're nesting parts on plate or sheet metal, it's that link between your nesting software and EPICOR. So pushing information back and forth between the two so that your nesting operators have the most up-to-date information. And once the nest is cut and complete, we can send that information back into EPICOR so that EPICOR knows the exact material usage and cut times, etc. And lastly, we have CADLINK, which is our EPICOR configurator integration. So that's a very powerful tool for sales and engineering, because we can build 3D models or configure 3D models from your CAD system based off of your EPICOR configurator inputs. So taking all the inputs that maybe your sales team is putting in the EPICOR configurator, and from those generating a 3D model that he can show to potential prospects, or attach that directly on the EPICOR quote so that customers can see exactly what they're buying. All right. So as I said, our main focus here is CADLINK, but why do we need CADLINK? Why do we need to integrate our engineering, our CAD systems into EPICOR? And to explain that, I think we need to look at what are the solutions without CADLINK. So what are people currently doing now? And there's two main methods that we've outlined, or that we typically come across in our CADLINK deals. And the first one is brute force. So meaning I've got my engineering data, I've got my CAD assembly, my engineer, he's put in all of my part numbers, he's put in all of my descriptions, And now I need to get that information into EPICOR. So I'm going to go into EPICOR, and I'm going to hand input each one of those part numbers, each one of those descriptions, revision, etc. It's very error prone, it's manual entry. So there's a lot of opportunities for human error. It's very time consuming. If you have bill of materials that are thousands of parts, having to enter and create the bill of materials and those parts for each one of those parts, very time consuming. It's so boring. Engineers, nobody wants to sit there and do that, but it is a zero software cost. So the cost of software is zero, but you have your cost is more in your errors and your time in this case. The other alternative is the two-step approach. So the two-step is where you would export that information into, let's say, an Excel or a CSV format, and then import that into EPICOR. So it's slightly faster than brute force. I'd say it is faster if you have thousands of parts. It is faster, but most of the time it requires setting up that data, massaging that data in both CAD and in EPICOR, so that as you import it, it's in the correct format, and so that there's no errors when you're importing that. Same thing when you export it. We have to make sure that the data that we're getting from CAD is in the correct format. So there's some time required to do that. There is no bi-directional connection. So with CADLINK, one of the benefits is not only the automatic part and bill of material creation from that CAD integration, but also the synchronization of data between your engineering and EPICOR teams. So with CADLINK, we have a bidirectional connection, so we can synchronize descriptions, we can synchronize part information so that your engineers are working with the same information that people in EPICOR are working with. The two-step typically reliant on a single person in IT. If something fails, then you have to rely on that person to come and fix it. If that person leaves, then you're left with a process that no one can support. And so in that case, you may still incur software costs because the IT person may have to develop something or has to work and create something to make this two-step approach work. So these are really the two things that we come across in our CADLINK opportunities, in our CADLINK deals, is that the companies are either manually entering that into EPICOR, or they're using this two-step approach, and they're looking for a much more elegant and cost-effective way of getting bill of material and parts into EPICOR. What does this all come down to? It comes down to pain points, so manual entry, that blind push, so we don't synchronize the data. We don't get any validation as well of any of that data that we're exporting and importing into EPICOR. You don't really see what we're importing unless we go through that bill of materials and check each line. And we still have our data silos, so we still don't have a connection between engineering and EPICOR. So they're not talking to each other. Even though we can export and import, it's not a live connection. And this can all result in slow engineering, wrong build, wrong inventory, shop scrapped parts, and just overall frustration. We've seen this time and time again from industry. People are just fed up with wrong builds going out the door, wrong inventory, and just having to do manual data entry. At this day and age, it just doesn't really make sense. So what's our solution? Well, our solution is CADLINK. So that live bidirectional integration between your engineering software, CAD, PD, and PLM, and EPICOR. So what does that look like? Well, let's take a look right now. I'm going to jump into a demo. To do that, I'm going to use this model here. So I am using an eDrawings version. But like I said before, we have integrations to over 40 different CAD, PDM, PLM systems. If you are interested in seeing a demo with your engineering files, we do offer custom demos, so send us your files and we can show CADLink working with your files. For the purpose of this webinar here today, I'm just going to be showing our eDrawings integration here on the EPICOR sales image. And CADLink is a direct integration to those CAD systems. So in here, we can see that at the top, I've got my CADLink options. So run CADLink engineering BOM here at the top. In your CAD system, it would work exactly the same way. In SolidWorks, we're built into the tools option menu. In Inventor, we have another ribbon at the top. In PDM, we're built as an add-in to your PDM system. So we're integrated directly into the CAD software. So your engineers don't have to leave the application that they know to be able to grab bill of material and part information and push that into EPICOR. So I've got my assembly here. I'm an engineer, and I've finished my design here, and I want to push this bill of material into EPICOR. So I would just launch CADLink engineering BOM. And what CADLink is doing now is it's going to grab that bill of material from your CAD system, and it's going to grab that part information, and it's going to compare with what currently exists in both the EPICOR part master and what currently exists in my EPICOR bill of material for this part. So CADLink can be extremely useful if you're going from Rev A to Rev B, and you're updating that bill of material in EPICOR. You can see exactly the changes that you've made from Rev A to Rev B that you're about to make in EPICOR. Because we compare your bill of material of that you have in CAD, which is now your Rev B, with your Rev A in EPICOR. So we can see parts that are being removed, quantities that are changing, parts that are being added, etc. And the result of that comparison and how we view those details in the CADLink interface, which is what we're looking at here, is through our color coding system. So we can see, or I'll show you that on the left-hand side, we see an indented bill of material structure. So we do maintain that indented bill of material structure coming from your CAD assembly. There's no limit on the number of sub-assemblies that you can have here, but we do maintain an indented bill of material structure in EPICOR. And we've got all of these different colors that are showing me the results of that comparison between my CAD assembly and what currently exists in EPICOR. So going through each of these colors, the green line items that we're seeing here, these are parts that do not yet exist in my EPICOR part master. So CADLink uses the part number as the key to look into the EPICOR part master to try and find that part. If we do not find it, we will highlight those in green to indicate to the engineer that this part does not yet exist, or this part number does not yet exist in my EPICOR part master. CADLink will then create that part for you and insert it into this bill of material in EPICOR for you. So again, really going back to reducing the double data entry, our engineers are entering this information already in our PDM, PLM, or directly into our CAD system. We don't want to re-enter that information. We want to let CADLink create those parts and insert that into the bill of materials for you. We can see that for these green line items, we've got a QB and 5 X's at the end for all of them. You may be wondering what that is, and that's the CADLink auto part numbering. So if you don't have auto part numbering, if you're not using a PDM or PLM, but you want to take advantage of EPICOR auto part numbering, we can set up CADLink to work with that. So grab the next available part number, and automatically assign that to your parts that you're creating in EPICOR. And because of that bidirectionality, we'll write that part number back into your CAD properties. So we'll see that when I do a save into EPICOR, the generation of these part numbers, what that'll look like. The next color is the white line items. And you may have guessed this is the opposite of those green line items. These are for parts that exist in my EPICOR part master. So again, using that part number, we searched in the EPICOR part master, and we were able to find this part. At that point, what CADLINK does is it compares the information, the properties that we're reading from your CAD model with the properties that we have in the EPICOR part master for this part. So a great example of that is the description. And if we find a difference in the description, we will highlight those in yellow. Now, this is not limited to only to the description. We can see the unit quantities also are in yellow. The revision up here also in yellow. Any yellow field really is indicating that there's a discrepancy in the data between what I have in my CAD model or my CAD assembly and what exists in EPICOR. For any of these yellow fields, I can right click on them and I can view the information that I have in my CAD model and the information that I have in EPICOR for this field. Going back to that bidirectionality, we can then, seeing that there's a discrepancy in the values here, we can then decide which value we would like to use as the appropriate description. So I can right click on these fields, I can view these values, and I can select which, in this case, description I would like to use. So in this example here, I have the material word in short form in EPICOR. And in CAD, I have material all written out. So maybe I want to use the fully written out word. So I can select that and I can synchronize this piece of information between CAD and EPICOR. So I want all of my data to match. I want my data to look like this white line item down here, right? So my part numbers exist in EPICOR, my description, my revision, all match. That's really what I'm aiming for. I want a fully white bill of material in CADLINK to indicate that everything is synchronized and everything exists in EPICOR. If neither of these descriptions are correct, I can also type in a new description manually, and it'll update both EPICOR and CAD with this new description. Moving down to the bottom of my bill of material here, I notice I have a gray line item down at the bottom here, 1.4.6. Now, a gray line item in CADLINK is telling me that there's a part that exists in my EPICOR bill of material that no longer or does not exist in my CAD assembly. So a lot of the times you'll see this, maybe if you're replacing a part in one of your sub-assemblies, you need to remove a part and replace it with a different component. Then that removed part, it'll exist in your EPICOR bill of material for your previous revision, but it's no longer in your CAD model. So we highlight those in gray to indicate that this is a part that we want to remove from the EPICOR bill of materials, because your engineer has decided, no, I don't need this part anymore. I'm going to remove it from my CAD bill of material, and therefore I no longer need it in EPICOR. Now, some of you may be asking, whoa, I still have parts that I need on my EPICOR bill of materials that are not modeled in CAD, and I don't want to remove those through this CADLINK process. Well, in that case, we handle that with what we call manual parts. And I can right click on this gray line item and I can say convert to manual part. It'll change that highlighting to blue, and it'll tell CADLINK not to delete this part from the EPICOR bill of materials. We can also add a new line item. So here I added a new line, 1.4.7. This part does not exist in my CAD assembly, but may still be required in my EPICOR bill. So Loctite, glue, grease, paint are typical examples of something that my engineer wouldn't necessarily model, but you still need to manufacture this part. So I can add a new line item here, and I can do a search in my EPICOR part master for existing parts and add this to my bill of materials here. Setting the quantity, because this is not coming from CAD, so I don't have a quantity to read from. We can insert and create a full bill of material in this CADLINK interface. A full manufacturing bill of material, I'll say. The one thing to note about these manual parts is that we do not write these back to your SolidWorks model, or to your CAD model, sorry. This information will reside purely in EPICOR, so we won't insert the solid model into your assembly. It'll just be components that are on the bill, but are not modeled in your CAD assembly. All right, so moving on, I'm gonna scroll a little bit further to the right here, and I'm going to show some of my EPICOR specific fields. Now here I have things like part type, unit of measure, product group, part class. These are EPICOR specific fields. These are typically not properties that are maintained or inputted into your CAD properties. But in CADLINK, we want to make sure that when we create parts in EPICOR, that we give the opportunity to set up those parts as much as possible. So CADLINK is an engineer's tool. The engineer is supposed to be using CADLINK to push bill of material and parts into EPICOR. And so we give them the option here to choose product groups, part classes, based off of options that exist already in EPICOR. So all of these are drop-downs, meaning I'm showing you only the available options that we have in EPICOR. So things like product group, I'm only showing you the product groups that I have in EPICOR. We don't let users or engineers create new product groups, part classes, unit measures, etc. through the CADLINK interface. They have to select an option that exists in EPICOR. And these fields are here really to make sure that when we create those parts in EPICOR that we give them as much information as possible and allow your engineers the option to set these up if they know the part types or if they know the product groups, etc. Scrolling to the right, this is where we'll find our raw material information. And there's two ways that CADLINK handles raw materials. The first is we can read a raw material from a CAD property. So if you have the raw material part number set up in your CAD properties, we can read that and automatically insert that into these columns here, as well as the material quantity. Or we can allow you to search through the EPICOR part master, much like I did with that manual part that I inserted earlier, and insert the raw material here. So I inserted a piece of sheet metal here, and I'm going to input a quantity. So if I don't have these mapped in my CAD properties, I can also add a raw material through the CADLINK interface. Going back to that bidirectionality, we will write this raw material part number and quantity back into your CAD properties. So making sure that the information is synchronized and up to date. Really the big useful part of the CADLINK tool. The next thing I'm going to show are some of these side panels that we have here. So in CADLINK, I do have the option to assign routings or operations to my assembly. This is optional if your engineers are not responsible for this, or if your design engineers rather are not responsible for this, then they don't have to do this step. But they do have the option to assign or create new operation sequences. So I can add an operation 10 here, choose an operation code that exists in EPICOR, add my labor entry, production standard, standard format, and setup hours. So I can create a brand new list of operation templates here. Or I can load an existing operation template from a part in EPICOR. So if I know that all of my aluminum extrusion parts, let's say need to get cut and deburred, and I know that I have an operation template in EPICOR that I can use for that, then I can automatically pull that in the CADLINK interface and create that or insert that operation template or sequence in EPICOR as well. So I've applied this operation template for this 1.12 subassembly here. Now that I've applied the sequence, I can also go into its child components and assign a related operation. So where do these parts get consumed in this operation sequence? By default, if you don't select any, it'll go to 10 when we create this in EPICOR. But we can also set the related operation to other operations in that sequence if we need to. So again, this is optional, but can be a very powerful tool if your design engineers are the ones setting up the manufacturing process for these parts. The next tab is the Bill of Material Changes tab. Now this is a read-only summary of the bill of materials changes we're about to make in EPICOR. And so we're only showing you what we're about to change in EPICOR. Now this bill of material changes tab is tied to the Save checkbox column that we have here. And the Save checkbox column is what we use to control what we save into EPICOR. So I can deselect everything and maybe choose just a subassembly. And my bill of material changes window here will reflect what I am choosing to save and to synchronize with CADLINK. So this is a nice view if you have a very large bill of materials and you're only changing a couple of things, or you're going from Rev A to Rev B, and you want to only see a summary of what you're changing. You can go into this tab and quickly see that information at a glance. The next tab is the Manufacturing Impact tab. And this is showing me a read-only view of certain information in EPICOR. So I can select certain parts here that exist in EPICOR, and I can view the EPICOR inventory. I can view POs, job orders, where used, and a cost summary. Again, read-only, but may give the engineer some insight into what we've got on hand and what's going on in the EPICOR world. So leveraging that EPICOR integration to give more info to the engineers, give a bit more of a background as to what's going on in the engineering or in the EPICOR world to the engineers. The CAD data will show me CAD properties that I have from my CAD models. So I can click around and view the CAD information or the CAD properties from my solid models. This is read-only, really meant just to so that your engineers can look at the properties in CADLINK without having to go into their CAD, find the part, open the part, look at the properties, etc. It's just a convenience thing so that they can view the CAD properties from the CADLINK tool. And the last tab here is the Messages tab. This is where I will view any validation messages that came from the comparison of my bill of material between CAD and EPICOR. So if I have If I have something that does not conform to any of my EPICOR rules that I set in place, I will see a message here. If I have a message here, the save checkbox will be disabled, and I'll need to resolve it before I can save this bill of material into EPICOR. And that's the bulk of the CADLINK application. Now, before I quit this, I do want to hop into the settings very, very quickly, just to show a few of the features that you can have with the extended field mapping module. So with the field mapping module, we allow you to create and manage your own field mappings between your CAD properties and EPICOR fields. So right now, this is what I'm looking at is my field mappings between CAD and EPICOR. And I can add here as much as I want. So I can add a field mapping between EPICOR user-defined fields, EPICOR standard fields, etc., to CAD to my CAD properties. And I can select if I want to show it in the CADLINK grid, if I want this to synchronize between CAD and EPICOR, or just push to EPICOR. So it gives me a lot of flexibility into what fields I'm adding or linking with CADLINK between CAD and EPICOR. The other thing that this module gives you is this custom logic. And in this custom logic tool, I can add logic to the way that CADLINK behaves. So if I have, and I'll show a couple of examples of this in the PowerPoint that I'll go back to, but a quick example going back to those operation templates, let's say I had a property in my CAD model, or if I had a prefix assigned to my part numbers, I can use this tool to add logic to say, if I have a certain prefix in my part numbers, automatically apply an operation template to this subassembly or to this assembly. So I can use this to help my engineers automate the application of let's say certain EPICOR fields or operation templates, and help CADLINK really work with the way that you guys are currently set up in your CAD model, or the way that you need CADLINK to behave. All right, I'm going to hop back into my PowerPoint here. So just a few more words on the extended field mapping module. Really, this is to add your own CADLINK BOM grid fields and field mappings between CAD and EPICOR. And so we allow you to map between the EPICOR part table, part material table, job material table, quote material table, and any of your EPICOR user-defined fields. So there's a lot of options there to let you push as much information as you can into EPICOR to help set up those parts. And a few examples of that custom logic that I mentioned. Here we've got an example. If I have a new part and that part number contains aluminum, then I'm automatically setting that product group, the part class, and that raw material to my to aluminum. Same thing at the bottom there. If I have steel, setting that part class and raw material and product group. Another good example of this is setting up certain quantities. So if I have certain calculations that I need to make with for my raw materials or for my standard parts, I can apply that in the CADLINK custom logic. So just a few more details on this. So this is in C#, and it lets you create if, else, true, false statements here in inside of CADLINK. So you control this. You don't need to reach out to us to apply or to set up new logic. This is something that you can do on your own. So I've got about 20 more minutes, which will leave us for some time at the end, I believe, for possible questions. But just going back into a summary and ROI of CADLINK. So why is it important? Why did I show you all of this stuff? Well, really, it's to provide a direct link into EPICOR, to create and push that revision information directly from your engineering team into EPICOR. Update those items, bill of materials, and operations directly from your CAD system. Really eliminate the need for double data entry, any data massaging, and give you a lot of insights due to that EPICOR integration, due to that direct EPICOR integration. What are the benefits of CADLINK? Well, we're reducing non-value added engineering activities. So if your engineers are spending time setting up their data, massaging their data to get into EPICOR, that's not time, as well with the double and triple data entries, that's not time that they're spending doing engineering work. Your engineers are a highly skilled resource that you don't want to waste on this kind of data entry and non-value added engineering activities. So by taking those tasks away from them and giving them a tool like CADLINK, we're bringing that back to engineering activities, reviewing those BOM changes before you get them into EPICOR, making sure and validating your bill of materials, and bringing that power back to your engineer. We're also at the same time improving the accuracy, so reducing scrap, eliminating those wrong builds, because we can see that information, we can see the comparison of the data between your CAD models and what exists in EPICOR. We can quickly at a glance notice if something is wrong, or if we're about to input bad information or bad data into EPICOR. We'll get a flag and say, hey, you need to check this out before you can save this bill of material. So really trying to improve that accuracy so that down the line, if someone in EPICOR now has that bill of materials that they're working with, they know that it's accurate. They know that engineering has looked at it and validated it. And they know that they won't, if they build it, get into a situation where they've built the wrong thing because someone made a mistake in their manual data entry. What would a typical ROI analysis look like for CADLINK? So typically we say an engineer creates about 1 hour of BOM data entry per day. This can vary depending on your company, on your organization. We do have some ROI tools available if you'd like us to help with some ROI calculations, but this is at a glance something that we've seen time and time again, that about 1 hour of work with CADLINK comes down to about 3 minutes. And so if you've got 8 engineers doing engineering work and designing products, then that's a whole person's workday in BOM entry that we can save with CADLINK. In terms of dollars, comes to about $65,000 per year. Now, obviously, this will range because different companies have different sizes of engineering departments, but this is a great rule of thumb that we use, and that this is just what we've come across in the industry time and time again. Quick point here, we are cloud ready. So Ray at the beginning mentioned EPICOR is also in the cloud. CADLINK can also work with the cloud version of EPICOR. So whether you're on-prem or you're in the cloud, we've got a CADLINK option for you. So that was CADLINK. I do want to give a quick overview of our Nestlink product. In case I did mention something at the beginning and you had a few more questions on it. So Nestlink is an integration into your nesting software. So the big ones that we're partnered with are SigmaNest, ProNest, and Encell. And it creates a live bidirectional bridge between EPICOR and your nesting software. So if you've got a new piece of sheet metal that has been added into your EPICOR inventory, we want to automatically create that in your SigmaNest part libraries or your nesting part libraries. Likewise, if there's demand coming from EPICOR on a job, we want to bring that directly into your nesting software so that your operators can see the work that they have to accomplish right away. same thing going back into EPICOR. Once that work is finished, we want to make sure that we are we're getting the right material usage, doing those material transactions in EPICOR to make sure that those operations are closed out, and updating our inventory. So that live bidirectional bridge between your nesting software and EPICOR just makes sure that both sides are communicating with each other, EPICOR and your nesters, and that they all have the most accurate, up-to-date information. That's it for me. We've got a little bit of time for Q&A. I saw some, I think some messages pop up.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. So let's have a look at the board here. So I'm going to unmute all the lines.
And
Feel
then
free
you go
to
to
ask a question.
Hold on one sec. I just.
She's doing it, Jen. She's back. She's getting the reviews. I needed left you on 2 days ago. Lambert.
Okay. Lockhart?
Lockhart.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah.
Oh, that was nice.
So, yeah.
We've got some background noise. I'm going to mute again just for.
Okay, so we did get a question from Steve. We're currently EPICOR CADLINK users. That's something that I'll have to discuss with your CADLINK project manager, Steve. So I believe I got your contact info from Ray. So I will relay that back to your EPICOR or your CADLINK project manager. And regarding the toolbar, yes, so you were probably on the older version of CADLINK. So we did do an upgrade to the latest version, and we did an upgrade to our CADLINK UI. So you're most likely on the previous user interface of CADLINK. If you want to upgrade, again, I'll get in touch with your CADLINK project manager, and we'll see about getting you an upgraded version of CADLINK.